Welcome to Intuitive Flow. I'm your host, Mikaela Filar, intuitive energetic healer, medium, entrepreneur, and mindset mentor with a mission to help you step into your fullest potential by giving you the tools to rid yourself of limiting beliefs, love yourself unconditionally, and create the reality that you dream of living. It is time to transform your mindset, get unstuck, and step into the highest frequency version of yourself who has unshakable confidence. I am even answering your juiciest questions regarding all things intuition, manifestation, personal development, self-love, self-image, and helping you work through your dilemmas, intuitively guiding you to expand your mindset and level up in life. So turn up the volume and get excited for this intuitive flow. Hey guys, welcome back to Intuitive Flow with Mikaela Filar. And today we have something very special for you. I have special guest Chelsea here. She helps women alchemize emotional pain to reclaim sovereignty and embody heaven on earth. She also has a podcast called Kindred Sage. I am so excited to have you here, Chelsea. Welcome to the podcast. I can't wait for my listeners to hear all the beautiful knowledge that you are about to drop for us. Go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Thank you so much for having me. As Mikaela said, my name is Chelsea. Kindred Sage is a business that I created to spread wisdom to all people who are interested. I think the collective is really awakening, and we're understanding that life is very energetic, that we are energetic. And I think there are a lot of pieces of wisdom that we don't have easy access to in modern day education. And so I'm on a mission to spread that education and to help others understand themselves better, to understand their past and their present, and how that can affect their future. So yeah, excited to jump in.
The collective is definitely awakening, and you and I both, we are on the path to helping spread that word. And I just love connecting with like-minded souls and individuals who are on a similar mission. So with all of that, I want to ask you, where did all of this start? How did you get into this work and decide that this was my dharma, this was my purpose? Like, I have this deep yearning to help others see things in a new light.
Yeah, this really started, I want to say, is super young. I had a really difficult childhood, lots of complex childhood trauma going on. My mom
Typical for a
left
healer.
yeah, exactly. We got to go through that darkness to see the light. But yeah, my mom, she left me when I was a baby. So my dad was raising me on his own, and he had a lot of his own trauma that I watched, through my childhood. I watched him numb and really just tune out, basically. He really didn't want to face anything that he had gone through with his own family, what he was going through. Like during my childhood, he, had some pretty terrible experiences. Like he found his brother after he had committed suicide. A few years after that, he had found his mom after she committed suicide. So he had faced a lot of these extremely traumatic events, but he didn't have the skills, the tools, the knowledge to process that energy and to figure out how to live his day-to-day life. So I really had this knight in shining armor. Like when I was really young, after my mom left, he was my protector. He was my nurturer. He was everything that I attached to, as a young girl. And then I watched him just completely fade. I tend to say he went from color TV to black and white. There really wasn't a lot of dimension to him. And a lot of that was because of his alcoholism and drug abuse, and I think there are a lot of people, including myself, that in the 20s and the 30s, that's all we know what to do, is just to drink to hide the pain, to mask the pain, because we don't know how to feel it. Again, we don't have that wisdom of figuring out that you really need to feel it, and that's the only way to process it. That drinking your way through it or taking drugs and just being numb to it isn't really going to do much for you. In fact, it's probably going to exacerbate the issues and then the symptoms that you experience and magnetize in your life. So that is really where it started, was seeing him go through all that pain. and not have any way of getting through it. And then, when that was happening, a lot was happening in my life. He ended up remarrying a very abusive woman who also had a lot of pain from her childhood. And now that I'm here, I can see that, and I have a lot of empathy for what she went through in her childhood, and I can see how easily that translated into her abusing me and abusing my dad. And not saying it was okay at all, but knowing that that happens when you can't deal with the emotional pain and you don't know how to heal. And yeah, so we had just a very crazy childhood, me and my siblings, but I ended up becoming a ward of the state. My father had signed me over to the state, and so I didn't go through the traditional foster care system. I actually had a friend whose parents wanted to be my guardians. So he signed me over to the state, and then yeah, they seriously, guardian angels. I am so blessed to have them. They stepped in, they started taking responsibility for me as my guardians. And so that was when I was 14. And I actually moved up to Northern California. So I was born and raised in San Diego. I moved to Northern California and started going to public school, which was like a huge shock to my system because previously I had been pretty sheltered in private school. So this is kind of the interesting part that I think a lot of people actually go through, is that from the outside, our family life looked amazing. Like the children we went to private school. Like we had a beautiful home in San Diego. Like my dad did have his own business. We had no idea that it was going down the drain at that point, because he was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and he was not able to function and keep that business going. But from the outside, it looked amazing. From the inside, we were just absolutely rotten. It was just crumbling from the inside. But anyway, so after, that whole situation, we had lost our house. So when I was in ninth grade, we came home and there was a padlock on the door and the house had gotten repossessed. And so that was like a big thing for the family. Me, I was just kind of like, okay, it's more chaos. Like I'm already used to chaos. Like here's just another thing. But it was after that where my dad really, thankfully had some kind of semblance of like, I need to get this girl out of here. And that's when he had signed me over to the state. So anyways, I came to Northern California. I started public school. Very different, very interesting, being able to actually talk to people with so many different backgrounds and different lifestyles. And I actually stumbled upon energy work through a friend in high school, and she was talking about this thing called the chakra system. And I had no idea what that was. I didn't really grow up religious or anything. We were pretty agnostic, but I didn't really have a lot of spiritual influence in my life at that point either. And so I was just really interested. Something in my soul just like drew me to that. And I started studying the chakras. And later on in high school, my guardian mom actually broke her hip. She fell off a ladder in the backyard and she had broke her hip and she was in the hospital. And they wanted her to get a hip replacement. The doctor said that was the only way that she was going to be able to walk again, was to get a hip replacement. And she said no. And I had no idea why. I had grown up thinking the doctors know everything. And so if they're telling you you're not going to be able to walk, you should probably get a hip replacement. And she said, no, I'm going to do something else. And she actually went to an energetic healer, and she spent quite a bit of time with this healer. And she worked with her chakra. She worked with her on a light table, activating her telomeres in her DNA to heal herself. And so to this day has not gotten a hip replacement, and she still gets up every day and does jazzercise. So that to me was like a physical representation of we can heal. Like we have the power inside to heal. And maybe there's something to this energetics thing. That is, that's kind of how I got started in that. Of course, I had many years of doing other things and not fully concentrating on it, but in my early 30s, I did reconnect with my father after he was homeless for over a decade. And he had gotten sober, thankfully, and he was really trying to get his life together. He had a girlfriend that was sober as well, and so they were really trying to grow their family, I guess, not by having children, but by bringing family back into their life that they had been estranged to. And so I was one of those for my father, and it took a lot of courage, and I had a lot of protection around my heart, but I decided to rekindle that relationship with him, and it was beautiful. Like I could see that dad that I knew when I was very small. And so that was just like, oh, he's back,
Oh, yeah.
and he can be in my life, and we can kind of do this over. We can have a second try at this. And then a year later, his partner's nephew had actually committed suicide. And that just triggered so much pain in him. I mean, so much pain came up and he couldn't deal with it. And so he fell off the wagon and he started drinking again. And I got this call that he was in the hospital in a coma. And I was like, what the heck? Like, this is like out of the blue. He was doing so great. Like, what happened? Well, he had driven home and was trying to get out of his car, and his girlfriend came out and saw him struggling and tried to help get him out of his car, and he literally had like no body control. And she said he fell back and he hit the back of his head on the curb, and so he had like intense swelling. And so she called the ambulance. She was like, we just need to make sure his head is okay. Like, what's going on? My goodness, girl. They told me that his blood alcohol content when he arrived at the hospital was 0.4, which is like, that's crazy. Like, he literally his body was shutting down. Like, of course he had no body control.
Yeah.
When he went in there, they actually sedated him so that they could scan his brain and everything and make sure like the swelling went down. And he had a couple strokes during that. And then he came to, and his body withdrawals were so intense that he was getting just like so volatile with the nurses and the doctors. And so they ended up putting him under again. And that was the state that he was in when they called me. And they said, he's not waking up. Like, we're trying to get him out of this, coma, and he's not waking up. So what do we do? And so I flew down to San Diego, and I wanted to talk to the doctors face to face, and I wanted to really see like his state. And it was so like surreal, walking into this hospital room, and my dad is just like, he's on every machine possible. Like, he's not my dad anymore. He's the shell of my dad, and he's just basically barely breathing, with the machine's help. And I had to face the biggest decision, the craziest decision. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone to have to decide whether, you're going to keep him on life support or pull the plug. And so I had to choose the latter because he didn't have any insurance. There was really no guarantee that he was going to wake up. They had been trying for a while to get him to open his eyes or to have some kind of response. And he wasn't there. And so,
wow.
Yeah, had to make that decision. And as you can probably imagine, yeah, it was extreme. And I was the only person really in his life, in his family, that was able to make that decision. So I was sitting in that room alone, with just praying to spirit, like, what do I do? What is the way through? Because I really had no clue. I had just rekindled this relationship with him, and I had just had, all of these ideas that we were going to have this beautiful life of him, meeting my kids and being able to be grandpa and like being at my wedding. And all of that wasn't possible in this moment. And so I had the grief of that, of like the future that I had idealized after rekindling our relationship. I had the grief of that, but then I had everything, everything in my childhood, all of the trauma just resurfaced in my vital body. And I was in the same spot that I watched him be in, where I didn't know how to deal with my pain. Like, I did not know how to feel through it. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the resources. I was spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on therapy. The total was probably over thousands of dollars on therapy, and I still wasn't able to process it. I still was drinking until I blacked out. I still was, trying to just numb all of the pain and try to pretend like everything was okay. And it really wasn't. And my body was telling me that it wasn't. And so that's when I got this just big like slap in the face from source that said, you need to get your shit together. Like you need to go and get away from like everything that's going on in your life, because in that moment I was magnetizing like so much toxicity. If I was able to like stop and look at the reflections of what was going on in my life, I was really like, I had toxic friends. Like my relationship was so dark at that point. I felt so stuck and unheard. I was literally waking up crying, just going like, why am I here? Like I shouldn't be here. And it was an overwhelming feeling of just like lost. I was so lost. And then Source told me like, you need to go. Like you need to figure this out. And so somehow I really still to this day am like, how did this happen? But a job opportunity just fell into my lap out in the Texas Hill Country. And so I thought about this opportunity for a while. I was really outsourcing my power by trying to ask everyone around me if it was a good idea, and trying to get
We
the
love that.
permission slip. Yeah, that permission slip from everyone else. Like, should I go do this? Versus really leaning into what spirit was telling me, which was that I just needed to go, and I just needed to see what was out there for me. And so I ended up doing that, and I drove 1,700 miles across, from California to Texas, and I cried the whole way, and I wanted to turn around so many times. And thankfully, my partner was like, go do it. Like, do what you have to do. We don't have to break up. That was another part of it, was that I was thinking so black and white. Like, if I go, we have to break up. Like, if I don't go, then we can stay together. And I'm so thankful that he was able to show me that there are many shades of gray, and that we were going to try, something different and see how it turned out. And we could always course correct, if that wasn't going to be right for us or aligned for us. So I went out there, and I literally had a cocoon. Like my apartment, I could like raise my hands and like touch the ceiling in my apartment. It was such a small space. And yeah, every single day I just went deep into it, and I started meditating every single day. I started moving every single day. I was doing yoga. I was walking. I even started running while I was out there, which I had never been a runner ever in my life. It was during 2020 actually when this happened. So I really couldn't distract myself with anyone else, like with making friends or going to the bars or doing any events. Like I literally couldn't distract myself from my pain. And so that made me just go into it. I went deep into it, and studying. I was studying a lot of energetics work, and I learned so much. And within about a month and a half, I felt so much lighter. Like I had processed so much by being able to nourish my body and my vital body and my mental state. Like leaps and bounds beyond what I had done in therapy for years. So that to me was like, okay, this is work that I need to share with other people, because I really learned through experience that like the healer is right here. Like I don't
Exactly.
need to outsource my power. Like I don't need to look for other people to heal me, because one, they don't know all the ins and outs of what I've been through. Like I just explained in a lengthy format. I've been through a lot,
Yeah.
and there are
Yeah.
a lot of details in there, and there's a lot that other people just aren't gonna know, and they aren't gonna be able to feel into. And so that was huge. Like the other people outside of me are not gonna figure that out. But the other thing was that we are so much more than this like flesh suit. There's so much more to us than the physical body.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so opening my mind to that and opening my heart, I think that was a big part of it, was just learning so much more about us being electromagnetic beings, that there is so much more than matter, and we can influence that energy like so much more than we can influence, our physical body. So yeah, that is a long-winded answer to how I got into energetics and finding my purpose.
Honestly, I still don't know how to short story my story either. I completely relate. And honestly, I appreciate you so much for sharing that with us here on the podcast. And I have a few questions for you that I've written down. So, first of all, I have some I have some past trauma in my childhood as well. And I always go back to the saying, they are doing the best they could with the resources that they had. And I
Mm.
absolutely love how you mentioned that, like, you know, in your 20s and your 30s, sometimes you can fall into different things that aren't the best for you, but you have no idea of like how else you can heal or fix things because you were never taught those things. And so you were able to see that when it comes to your dad, but I know for a fact that that wasn't always the case, right? Like you weren't always like, "Oh, he's doing the best he can with the resources that he had." So,
Oh, no.
at what age were you able to truly alchemize the situation and be like, "Okay, I'm looking back on this and I'm choosing to forgive because I know that he was doing the best he could with the resources that he had."
I think it was my late 20s, and it actually, that forgiveness didn't come from that perspective. The forgiveness really came from, I'm poisoning myself with all of this resentment that I have for
Yeah.
him. And that's where the forgiveness really came from for him and my stepmom and a couple other abusers in my life. It was way more like holding on to this resentment isn't going to change anything. Like, instead, it's going to just keep crippling me and my perspective and what I am bringing into my field.
Yes.
It wasn't until after he passed away, I think, that I realized, like, oh my gosh, like he didn't have the resources. Like, it wasn't until I went through not having the resources that I realized, like, no wonder, no wonder he was doing that. Like, of course, I just did the same thing.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, but I mean, the fact that you like, there's two roads. Like I was in and out of therapy for the majority of my life. And there's like, I remember specifically this one therapist, it was like a group where my mom came for one of the sessions. And the therapist looked at my mom and was like, she could have gone down a very different path because,
Mm.
you know, everything that she has been through. And it was like when I was in high school still, I think. And, you know, she could not be having good grades. She could have chosen way worse friends. She could have, you know, so on and so forth. There's always two different paths that we can go on when we go through these traumatic events. And you watched your dad go down one path. And do you think that that gave you the strength to choose the harder path, which is looking inward on how you can heal yourself and then making the change necessary, like moving, leaving your boyfriend? Like, that's huge. That's hard. Those are hard decisions. But you listened to your intuition and you were like, I just have a knowing, which is your intuition, that I need to leave, that I need to like truly be alone and sit with myself. And I thought it was so funny how you mentioned that you could just reach up and touch your ceiling, because literally same. When I moved from my hometown to Costa Mesa, and my whole apartment was 250 square feet, and my boyfriend now is 6'5", and he, towards the end when I met him and I was still living out there, would come visit and his head could like, it was like this far away from the ceiling.
Yeah,
So this thought that was really
that's so funny.
beautiful how you like, I thought it was really beautiful how you like, you just listened to that inner knowing and you just like left and you made the hard decisions that you needed to make in order to flourish, in order to alchemize the situation and learn that you're in charge of your reality and the only person that's going to heal you is yourself. Like, not a lot of people have the courage, and not a lot of people are willing to take that radical responsibility. So I hope you give yourself credit for that.
Yes. Yeah. I am very, very grateful for that, like for being able to, one, hear like and listen to my intuition, but then the follow through. And it wasn't, I do want to make sure that I am clear that it wasn't easy, right? Like my ego was throwing all sorts of tantrums. You know, my ego was like, is it actually the thing, you know, that we can do? It's going to be so much worse. Isn't this fine? Like, it's that whole idea that, you know, you will always pick a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. Like, that is really what I was
Yes.
facing at that point. Cause it was like, well, I know what it's like to be here. Like, I know what it's like to like be in this pain. But yeah, I think going back to what you said with the two paths, you know, I say that too, that like looking back at my life, like I could be so awful. I mean, just like the things that I went through, it's like, I mean, I definitely could be way worse off than I am. And again, I'm really thankful for my guardian angels. You know, they really were kind of that other pathway for me. But I think it's like we have those paths in so many different like milestones in our life. And this was a big one, like facing all of this dark night of the soul. And you know, what's interesting from an astrological point of view, it was my Saturn return, you know, like your Saturn return happens like between that 29-31 time period. And
So
looking
is
at,
mine.
you can always look back. Yeah. And see like, wow, like something really big happened usually like during that time period.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at your chart and look at what sign Chiron is in, my Chiron is in Cancer, which is all about family and relationships. And so looking back, I'm like, duh, like, it has all over it, like something major is going to happen, like with family and relationships. And obviously it did.
Yeah.
And it kind of, it affected more relationships than that, because I did go have this like months in Texas really healing myself, and then came back, and my friends say like you came back a completely different person, like 180 from who you were. You know, I was the party girl that was just always like drinking, smoking, like wanting to do like anything just to get away from my feelings, my emotions, what was happening inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back and I've been, I would say, sober curious. Like I haven't blacked out like since then. I don't get that drunk. I have no desire to get that drunk now. You know, I really appreciate who I am like sober. So I'll have, you know, a glass of wine or a beer here and there, but nothing like before. But also just how open I was, you know, and for those that know about the chakras, that is a big piece of it, is that, you know, when you're closed down, you have no ability to connect with others in multiple areas of consciousness, you know, in your life. And I came back with just wide open arms, wide open heart. Like, how do I connect and
That's
really build
beautiful.
like just deep friendships and deep relationships? So I needed that. I needed that in my life, because now I just look at my relationships, and even just doing this, even being able to like open up and tell my story, you know, and being able to express myself in this way. Like my throat chakra is open, my heart is open. You know, it's beautiful what can happen when you're able to really process that closed down energetics, you know, in your chakras, and be able to, what I call, unfold. You know, it is totally like a flower unfolding. You get to see the brilliance of people, you get to see the brilliance of life and the fullness of life when you're able to have that resonance internally.
Do you think that, like, are boundaries something that are new to you when you sat with yourself in Texas for months? And was that something that you learned, or was it something that you feel like you always had?
It was something that I always had in my head, but the
Mm-hmm.
actuality of being able to like put firm boundaries in place and hold them there, that was my challenge. And I think it was after Texas and after really healing myself that I was able to say, like, you know what? I need this space. Like, here is my boundary, and I'm going to repeat my boundary until you respect it. Because I realized I was doing, it was borderline like people pleasing, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
I wanted, especially with my father, that was who I really had to like work on boundaries with. And before he passed away, a lot of it was like I wanted that connection so bad. I wanted it to be how it was when I was super young, like with my dad. And I wanted to ignore where he was in his life. And I think that was the difficulty for me, was like, how do I protect my heart but also try to like open myself up to having this relationship with him? And the way that you do that is boundaries, you know, like that way
Yeah.
you can kind of inch into it versus just being like wide open, like you can have everything, you know, and access to my whole heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where that began. But again, it was really difficult to hold those. And
Yeah.
now I have those boundaries, and I like to say that I'm a really good bricklayer. I can build those brick walls and hold them there. Like, because
Yeah.
I need it. and having a kid. I think having a kid has really changed the way that I look at that too, because now these boundaries aren't just for me, they're for him too. And I
Yeah.
actually, this is such a tangent, but this is a funny moment that just happened last week where I told Chris, like, she has evolved, because I was at the store with my baby, and he's such a chunk. He's such a little cutie, but I had him in like the front of the basket, and we were just like going through the produce section, and this woman walks up and she's like, "Oh, I don't actually need lettuce. I just wanted to come over and see this cute baby." And she goes and she like reaches for his feet. And I didn't like full on swat her away, but I like put my
Yeah.
arm out and I was like, actually, no, I don't let strangers touch him. And
Yeah.
in the moment, I was like, oh my God, like past Chelsea would have never said that. I would have just been like, like this is kind of awkward, but whatever. But
Yeah.
now, having a kid, I'm just like, I am his steward. Like I am the person that holds boundaries for him and is the person
Mm,
responsible for his like body autonomy and spirit autonomy. And to have a complete stranger touch his energetic field and touch his body is not okay with me. And
I
so
agree.
being
Yeah.
able,
I don't have any kids, so I haven't thought about that at all. But like the way that you just mentioned that like you are the steward of his boundaries, like you have to hold his own boundaries for him. And
Mhm,
children are such like they are so pure, right? And they are so connected to
mhm,
source when they're that little. And
mhm.
they're also sponges up until they're like 7 years old, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's so important, and that's definitely something I'm gonna steal from you when I have kids.
Good.
So, do you think so? Okay, you said that during all the turbulence, during all of this, you were dark night of the soul situation when you decided I need to go to Texas. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Gotta go. And you mentioned that you got a slap in the face from source. Was that slap in the face from source the basically you feeling like your life blew up, or was there a specific like moment where you really heard their voice? Like what was the situation there?
Yeah, it was the latter. It was 4th of July in 2020, and I was camping with my partner and a bunch of our friends. And I got so drunk during the middle of the day. And even like saying that and thinking about that, it brings up a little bit of like shame emotion. I've worked through a lot of shame around like that time of my life, but man, this moment was just so eye-opening for me. I had blacked out and I came to sitting on a rock in the middle of this creek crying my eyes out. Like I was just like bawling, and I like came to and I was like, what the fuck? Like what am I doing like on this like rock in the middle of this creek? Like all my friends are like partying and I'm just here like just having this like intense like emotional breakdown, and like I was so blacked out and drunk. I was like, how am I going to get off this rock? Like there was like a lot of like factors here. And then I just kept hearing this, like, this is it. Like, this is it. This is it. This is it. And yeah, that was really the big catalyst for me. It was just like, who I was when I came to. I was like, this isn't me. Like, this isn't me. Like, so I need to do something right now, or else, like, this is gonna just go really bad for me. And yeah, that was just thinking about that. Man, I've come so far. That feels like lifetimes away now.
2020. I was getting a lot more downloads. I was getting more in tune with my gifts as well during that time, and I learned a lot on my own, but I also had a mentor. And
Mm.
so I'm wondering, is there anyone that you connected with that helped you learn all about what you know now, and what you teach? Or is this
Mm.
solely what you've been able to download from source or your higher self? And you've been able to, and like the school of life, right? And you've been able to take all of that and kind of be like, okay, this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah, it was mostly a soul download. Like I had already known. I had a lot of like how would I say it? Like body awareness. So I knew that I really needed to like heal my physical body, and that's where it started. I started obviously not drinking, not doing drugs, moving my body, and then that moved into more like meditation. And I had already had a little bit of meditation experience in my 20s. I was actually married in my early 20s, and I
LOL,
had
same.
started doing, yeah, I started doing, wow, twinsies. I had started doing yoga and meditation like in my marriage, and it actually like awoke me to the fact that like that marriage was not for me. And then after that, I had continued doing that after we had gotten divorced. But then I had a period there where I stopped doing it, and it took me a while to see this, but I think I had this, not I think, I know that I had this bit of an imprint that meditation and yoga was going to flip my life on its head, because that's what happened like in my marriage. Like it had opened my eyes to see that the path I was on was not my path. And so I had like a little bit of a hiatus there where I was like, oh God, I just don't want anything to change. I'm on this path. I want it to be just the same. So I wasn't into, my meditation and my yoga. And then when obviously everything changed already, like how much more could my life flip on its head like at this point? So I got back into it, and I had a lot of downloads through meditation, and just a lot of perspective shifts, like really zooming out. And I had a mentor in my early 20s say this, that I see the forest for the trees. And I want to say that's really what that was like this, just like zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in. Like, so I could start to see like overarching themes and like healing that I needed to do, and then really specific things, and then overarching. And I just went like oscillated back and forth between that. Using the techniques that I had. I didn't, at that time, I didn't know what EFT tapping was. And I haven't mentioned that yet, but that's what my main modality is now. I did learn EFT tapping, and actually through, oh my gosh, Brad Yates. And I'm a certified EFT tapping practitioner. And so I lead my clients through that in order to alchemize emotional energy in their vital body. Because that's a big part of this, is that I learned through how much I was doing therapy, talk therapy, that I was really just, I guess, making those imprints deeper in my mind.
Yep.
I was really like,
Reading them.
this is my story. Yeah, this is how hard it was. This is how much it hurts. I just kept digging that deeper, versus actually being able to access the healing in the emotional blueprint of those traumas, and be able to move the stagnant energy, because that's what a lot of it is. Like trauma lives in the body. It lives like in the consciousness in your chakras, and that emotional vital body. And so being able to learn that EFT tapping was a great way to enter those healing portals and be able to move that energy. That's really what I needed to do, was actually move that stagnant energy so that I could open up the flow of energy in my vital body. And so that is what I do now with my clients, is teach them how to do that themselves, and then also walk them through that, because an outside perspective is really helpful. When you're in the thick of it, you just know it hurts, like, and you just know you don't want to feel like this anymore. And it is pretty difficult to see, where in your body you're holding that pain. And so the outside perspective of having, a certified practitioner be able to work with you, that's the benefit of it, is that they can kind of see that. And intuitively, when you speak to someone, if you have that intuitive gift and you can really listen, you can see like where it is in their body and where it correlates to certain consciousness, and be able to help them through that. So yeah, that's the best gift, I think.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful gift. I mean, it's when I do something, I don't do EFT tapping, but I do something very similar where I'm able to just really sit in the other person, in my client's energy, and feel, okay, where am I feeling any sort of discomfort? Where am I feeling any sort of pain? And that is just the telltale sign of where the trauma is stored, where what that correlates to, what I can dig up without them even saying a word, right? And that's what's so incredible and so special about being an intuitive energetic healer. But that
Mm-hmm.
EFT tapping is something that I actually just learned from the mastermind that you and I are currently in. And
How does it feel? Do
I've
you
been
like
loving
it?
it. Yeah, I've been loving it. I think it's really like definitely like gets things flowing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think I need to do it
Good.
more. I've only done it like 4 times now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the ones that are available for us in that mastermind that we're in are also very specific to like business owners.
Hmm.
And so I that, you know, those topics, that's really what that is honing in on versus when you do hold a lot of trauma, and you have had that imprint, it can feel a little bit different than what she's providing there. Yeah, I'm so glad that she included that. I didn't even know that was going to be a part of it. And I'm like, oh, yes, like this is my thing.
This is up your alley. I love it. So, are there any other modalities that you use, or are you focused on EFT tapping and then like just intuitive knowledge?
um,
What you collect from source?
Yeah, yeah. So those two are my main, and then also meditation. Doing deep meditation, especially like visualization meditations, to help clients really be able to connect with their inner child. That's one of the big ones.
Mm,
Is especially with childhood trauma. You know, it's that inner child that's really fearful and is really hurting, and so being able to connect with that inner child and almost reparent, like be the protector for yourself, for your inner child, and that nourishment for
yes.
your inner child. And then the other one is higher self, so being able to guide them into a deep meditation to meet their higher self, because I think you can glean so much guidance from your higher self. That is literally what your higher self there for, is to be like,
Yeah,
hey, here's a good path for you. But we're so out of touch, and it's so hard in this modern world too, where we have just so many things yelling at us and distracting us, and it is really hard unless you have a practice where you're connecting often. It's hard to hear, you know, your higher self. So being able to tune
100%.
in, that's helped a lot of clients. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love chatting it up with my higher self. And I love when I can help my clients connect to their higher self too. I think that's something so special. So I love that we do similar thing. We have some similarities. We have some, some differences, but I love that. And I think that that is totally why we were like, called to get on this podcast and
Yeah.
record an episode and share our story. I am so excited to get onto your podcast and share my story. And before we wrap this up, I want to ask how can my followers find you? What do you got going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. That is the only social media I'm on. Again, this modern world, there's just so many options out there, and with a baby at home, I'm like, let's keep this nice and simple. So I am on Instagram. My handle is kindred.sage. You can follow me there, and then I also have my podcast. I can't wait to have you on and hear more of your story, because it sounds like we have some similarities here. Yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
yes.
And I guess we haven't mentioned the biggest one. We're both Virgos.
Ah,
Which
yes, love
was
that.
like,
Virgo
yeah,
power.
an instant magnet that brought us together. But yeah, that's where you can follow me and watch my journey. I do have some big things coming up as far as offerings to get deeper into that energetic healing and alignment. So yeah, I'd love for you to join
I
me.
love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for being on Intuitive Flow. I am super excited for my listeners to listen to your incredible, inspiring story. And you guys go follow her. She's such a sweetheart. And if you like this episode, make sure you subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or leave a rating and review if you feel called. Screenshot it, share it to your story, tell your friends. That's how my podcast grows. It means so, so much to me. I appreciate you guys all so much for being here. Chelsea, you are amazing, and I can't wait to chat with you soon. I hope everyone has an amazing day. Chat soon. Bye.